Welcome in, everybody. I've got some crazy ideas that I've actually seen float around a few places. I think one guy had a build that was somewhat unsuccessful because there was debris from the machining or something that toasted his engine after he built it. But I've had this idea for a while, and I wanted to show you an inexpensive way, theoretically, to build a 3-liter M20. So this is an M20, and I've got M54B30 and M54B25 pistons in here with a 3-liter crank. This is out of an M54. So you can see down here it's got the trigger wheel for the M54. These are 135 millimeter connecting rods. I have a like a forged rod on one of them. Still the same length, but it's down there. And then this is the M54B30 connecting rod. Anyway, that's all in here. I've just got it set up so I can roll it over and then take some measurements for you. So up on top, you can see, here, I'll take this guy off. You can see the M54B30 protrudes. And it's about 80 thousandths of an inch. But let me grab the Mr. Wrench here and we'll turn this guy over, and you can see this guy, the M54B25, protrudes about 1 millimeter less. So the pin height, the crown difference between the the B25 and the B30 piston is about 1 millimeter. So the pistons are actually shorter in their pin height for the deck of the M20. So my thought was, you run a 3-liter crank, so S52 or M54B30, and then you take this piston and do one of two things, if not both. You could take 1 millimeter off the top of it, so just fly cut it just 1 millimeter down, and or the compressed thickness of the gaskets for the M20 is, the standard is 1.75. I do believe they offer a 2.1 or a 2 millimeter gasket, so you can gain some gasket height for the clearance of the cylinder head going this direction. I have put the cylinder head on, and with a stock cam and a compressed stock head gasket, I have been able to successfully turn the motor over. So I know, and I used some Play-Doh. You can just use like Play-Doh to check your piston to valve clearance. The B30, it touches. It just barely touches. So you could fly cut or try to cut out where the valves are on the B30, but I don't recommend it. I actually think this is just too tall. There's not a lot of crown on this either to work with if you're trying to machine it off, but you have a fair amount of crown here to work with if you're trying to modify these. So if you put them on a mill and just fly cut them, you'd probably be okay, and or run a thicker gasket. With the 3-liter crank, if I remember correctly, with everything I measured up, I just used Summit Racing's compression calculator. This 3-liter crank, 135 millimeter connecting rod, the M54B25 piston, and the, I think it's 43 cc's on the M20 cylinder head, the standard one. They make about, I think it was like 10.5 or 11-to-1, somewhere in there, compression ratio, which might sound high, but if you want just kind of an NA ripper and put a good tune on it, this might be a good way to do this. Now, the reason I bring this up too is because we're at like the peak of E46s in junkyards. There are tons of these 3-liter cranks and 135 millimeter connecting rods and the B25. Like B25 stuff, like nobody wants, so it's essentially free to get pistons. Like you can get on eBay or you can go to a local junkyard and get like a $50 set of these things. So I have one that this was actually just from someone I found locally that had one that had a damaged cylinder head, but just got the piston for free. Like literally this stuff is cheap. And as long as you have piston to valve clearance, at least 1 millimeter, you're good. So you can go put this in, put the cylinder head on with some Play-Doh, crank it over, make sure they're clear on all the different cylinders, and then honestly, it should work. There is a guy that did this I can't remember if it's a Rev Limited forum or something, but it was so short-lived there wasn't much data on it. But it seems like a cheap way to get an increased displacement M20. So let me just measure this up real quick. I've got my dial gauge here. Just want to show you, just so we can get some measurements, how much this guy protrudes. So let me zoom in. I want to get you guys some information so you're not left in the dark if you want to try this. So we'll try that. Bear with me. I'll just try to zero it on the deck, and then we'll move it between the two pistons. So we're going to mainly focus on this guy because this is what I think will actually work. So if we come up on the deck and zero this guy out. So let's go zero it out. We're going to get close, just as close as I can. Try to center it right there. And here we go. Okay, we're zeroed out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the piston down a touch if I can. Hold on. Okay. And then we're going to bring this guy just over. And then we're going to bring the piston back up. Sorry, I've got this kind of rigged. Okay. I think we're like 55. Yeah. We're like 55 thousandths up out of the deck. So if I rock this guy back and forth, yeah, like 56 or something like that. I mean, I'm trying to get it centered for you guys, but just call it 55 thousandths out of the deck. So the M20 pistons actually stick out more, but it's just in different places. It's the critical points are the intake valve, which kind of lands just off center. It kind of lands right in here, and this pocket that's already here is actually part of where it will clear. So you might only need to take a little bit right here. And then the exhaust valve is kind of over on this backside, and it definitely needs to be fly cut a little bit. But you can also probably get away with this if you bought one of the cam gears. You could, I think when I measured it last time, I'll have to look at my old videos. I think that there was more intake, there was exhaust clearance issues. So you could adjust it, and I think you would want to advance it so you could get a little bit more clearance there. But basically between shaving a piston, and if you can't shave a piston, getting a thicker gasket, and if you get a thicker gasket, you could also use a timing gear, an adjustable one, and try to make it work that way. So if you don't have access to machining, there's two other ways, thicker gasket and that you can do here. It's about, I think it was like 11 to 1 or high 10.75 to 1 with the M54 piston. So anyway, just wanted to get this on paper. I'm probably not going to have these back in here again because I actually have the CP Carrillo pistons over here that are going in this. So I have custom pistons. The reason they're so loose is because this is actually an 85 millimeter bore, but I have it out, wanted to show you. I hope someone out here sees this video and makes this exact combination. I pretty much have enough spare parts to make one, but I won't get to it for a while. So hopefully someone out there gets around to it and does. Oh, let's real quick before we end this, let's just zoom back in. And so that's 55. Let's just bring it back to 0, and then we're gonna do the M54 B30, because I would hate for someone to be like, oh, your video ended and I never got to see what it was. I know how that goes. It's like the one thread that never gets finished that's highly important on a forum or something, and everyone's asking about it. Okay, so it's like 85 thousandths, kind of. So it's like 85 thousandths out of the deck, and this one's 55 thousandths. So anyway, if you have this stuff laying around and you want to do something cool, give it a shot. Thanks for listening to me ramble. Hopefully this helps someone out. And yeah, you can get this stuff kind of all over. These are fairly accessible, and there's a lot of cool things about them too. Is they are lighter than the M20 pistons by a lot. I think, gosh, I wish I had my scale, but I measured it before, and these are like 260 grams, and an M20 piston is like 100 grams more than that. The other thing that's nice is they have thinner rings, and thinner rings is less friction, so they're a little bit more efficient. When they're brand new, you won't have any issues. There was an issue with these where the thin rings caused smoking, but that was on like street cars with high miles and stuff like that. Like for a fun performance application, these just need to be cleaned up. The biggest issue I've found when I was pulling these apart is that the oil rings clog up. So if you have like new rings, or if you take old rings and clean them really well, just so the oil rings aren't clogged and the oil ports aren't clogged, I doubt you'll have any issues smoking. Just clean these out really well with like a toothbrush and a ultrasonic. Anyway, have fun. Thank you for listening to the ramble. Hopefully this helps somebody. If you have a successful build of this and you end up going with it, comment, please let me know, or find me on Instagram, Turbine Research on Instagram. Let me know. I'd love to like talk with you about it, see how it works. And yeah, thanks again.